All right, hey, and welcome back to part 3 of this video series on AI and its effects on education. So today we're going to be looking at really the theme of transformation and adaptation. We've been talking about all these great tools out there. We've jumped into some of these. We've looked at chatbots. We've looked at GPT. We've looked at image creation sites that create things that are truly unique and one of a kind and will never be reproduced again. We talked in part 1 of this video about how some of the old tools out there like turnitin.com are perhaps becoming archaic, and one wonders, will they be around years from now? Kind of like those old Blockbuster video stores that have now gone away with the exception of one, I think, that is still in place because of the streaming technologies that have replaced DVDs and VHS tapes and all that kind of stuff that maybe some of us older folks on campus or more senior folks on campus are familiar with from our past. So we're always feeling like, the technology is kind of one step ahead of us, and what are we doing? And that's really the theme of this part 3 video is how do we transform ourselves as professionals? Whether you work in a particular office on campus, whether you teach online or face-to-face or RSP, how do we keep up with this technology in AI that we've been talking about such that we can continue to do our jobs effectively? And even imagine that maybe this will make some of our jobs a little bit easier in a way that will not compromise our professional integrity, or for students will not compromise our authenticity as a student in a class. We really want to think about these issues in that most, I don't almost say ambivalent way, to go back to Dennis Goulet's work, the two-edged sword of AI technology, benefits, disadvantages, pros and cons, etc. So some of the areas we're going to focus on today in this part 3 video would be, how do we change some of our policies on campus or engage others in conversations about policies? The one that really jumps out just because of my role in it years ago, in fact, the office I have right now used to be Dr. Steve Adams' office. And I remember Steve and I spent a lot of time working on the plagiarism policy. And when we were writing it, there weren't like cell phones of this type. I mean, we had Palm Pilots and little planners that we used a stylus on, and it was very like low-tech kind of stuff. So a lot of the language that we have in the plagiarism policy is dated by now. It's kind of funny. There's like this anachronistic technology listed in there only because the technology has advanced and we haven't changed the policy. So this is one aspect, I think, of our plagiarism and dishonesty policy we want to include. And by all means, we want to engage with our shared governance systems across the campus. We want to have faculty involvement through the Senate, as it's our primary role to really engage in these conversations about something that's an academic class policy. So how can we envision changing and altering our academic dishonesty and plagiarism policy here at LTCC? We can also imagine looking at the nature of work. As an example of that, I've been looking a lot here at GPT. And if I start a new chat here and I say, write a memo. Actually, I'm going to do this because we have an accreditation meeting this Friday. So let me think of something really specific. Write a memo that expresses the value of new technology as related to our upcoming ACCJC community college. I'm trying to be a little specific, and one of the things I really recommend here as a tip is get super specific with your prompts, whether you're using the generative image stuff like DALL-E or using ChatGPT for your text searches, because that's going to really help you guide the generative technology that creates this. So the other thing you can do is all of these, again, are saved as a chat on the side. You can always go in, like if I don't want this one, I can go in and actually delete it. The little icon comes up. Now I lost it there. Shouldn't have done that. Let's see. The problem is I didn't generate that last one yet, so it actually didn't create that. So I'm just going to start a new one. Sorry, let me just do it real quick. Okay, create a memo on the value of new technology related to our ACCJC accreditation. So I'm trying to, again, use prompts that will ping it and guide it a little bit. And what I was trying to say there before I screwed up my chat sidebars here is once you start this, let's just hit generate. If you don't like it, what you can do is change it and say, no, take this out or add this to make it more specific. So check this out. It actually figured out that the ACCJC is a accrediting commission for community and junior colleges. And new technology, look at this. It is totally nailing it. Student learning and outcomes, efficiency of productivity, institutional data and analysis. In light of these benefits, I encourage all departments to identify and adopt new technology that aligns with their ACCJC accreditation goals. Let's work together to ensure that we are staying ahead of the curve and providing our students with the best possible education. You know, the fact that it even gets like lingo, like ahead of the curve, is fairly impressive. Again, this is not like stilted language. Some of it is quite good and it's kind of humanized and it kind of understands that in a memo, you don't want like stilted or really stoic or kind of stodgy language. So, all right, so one of the things that I think is pretty important in using any of this AI technology that we've been talking about in this entire video series is to really think super carefully about the prompts that you write. So whether you're using an AI image site like Stable Diffusion, or if you're using ChatGPT to do more text-based stuff, computer programming, code, that kind of stuff, it's really key when you write prompts to think about the level of specificity needed to get what you want. The cool thing about ChatGPT, unlike the image sites, is if you don't get exactly what you want, you could regenerate a response. You could add more clarity here in this box. And then it becomes, as you see with all the saved conversations, it becomes something that's more iterative over time. You can certainly do that with an image. As an example, if I take this prompt here in Stable Diffusion and say internet site on a laptop, and I hit generate, you're going to see a particular image comes up. Again, these are all really random and created. These are all different. I notice Stable Diffusion does a lot of weird stuff with text, but you see what that looks like. Now, just adding this prompt, which is a specific artistic style, in this case, a pencil drawing, look at the difference in the image that is created here. And these are actually quite good. I mean, some of this, when I see it, like I often will just download some of these images because I think they're unique and interesting. I mean, graphically, they're just so much fun to play with. But a lot of the sites will also have examples at the bottom here. So anything like a particular type of object or place, as you can see in here, a style, Edward Hopper, right? You know, Nighthawks, the famous painting. What's cool about the image generation site is you can use styles or names of artists. You can do the same thing in ChatGPT. For example, add in a prompt and say, write a poem that is similar to Georges Bataille or someone who's famous or someone whom you like as an artist, as a writer, etc. So one of the things I recommend that you do is go to Google and type in either AI image prompt guides, or for ChatGPT, just type in ChatGPT prompt guides. And what's cool about this is you're going to get different kind of prompt guides that will take you through this journey, showing you exactly how you might achieve something that is desirable. I mean, some of these are quite amazing. If you look at this, that's an amazing image generated by AI. So as you get into some of these images, you see like these are absolutely phenomenal. But in order to do some of these, you really do have to think very carefully about what you put into the computer. And the other thing I'll note is that every system has its own approach in terms of prompt writing. So if you want to get very specific, when you look for one of these guides, you can type in the specific program you're using. So AI image prompt guide for Stable Diffusion. And I say this because I tried some prompts that work in other programs like DALL-E or Midjourney, and they don't work in another one. So unfortunately, you know, it's not the case where these are all the same in terms of the prompts. Now, of course, if you type laptop in any image site, you're always going to get some image of a laptop. But when you get into styles, when you get into lighting, for example, if I type here a laptop computer on a dark street with low lighting from above, this should, because of these prompts here, darkness, low lighting, and from above, it should generate an image that has those characteristics. So again, the object or the place or the person that you type in one of these AI image search engines will always typically produce, in this case, a laptop computer. The thing that's different are the other parameters. So we can see in this case that it is a street, so it put it correctly on the street. It is low lighting. You could see there's some shadow here, almost vignette effect, and it is from above. Now, let's try something different from what if I type from a high building? I don't know. One of the things I recommend in addition to the prompt guides is to carefully, as you work through any of the AI sites, think about your own techniques that work or don't. So in this case, I wanted it to show it from a high building. It actually didn't do that, and this is kind of making my point. So these images actually are cool. Again, some of these are good enough to download in my mind. What I wanted, though, instead of this, was I wanted the camera to come from a high building and not simply it to be, I just lost those there, an image of the street in front of buildings. So it's very important, again, with these prompts to really think carefully. This is one for ChatGPT, and this one is quite amazing. So there are over 50 of these. And what I want to indicate here is, if you just write this, let's try this out. Okay, so if my prompt was only, I want you to act as a travel guide, what will it tell us in response? And this is a case where I have to go back and restart from the beginning. And as usual, it says we are in high demand, and I see that literally daily on ChatGPT. So let's see if this says anything. Now, I want you to act as a travel guide. Of course, I'd be happy to act as a travel guide, provide more details on where I'd like to travel and the information you want, recommendations, etc. Okay, so that is kind of, all right, it's going to give me recommendations on travel spots. However, the point is here, this is going to be even more specific, and it's a much longer prompt. So if I put this in, you're going to see the response from ChatGPT is quite different. And of course, there's the specific thing about Istanbul. And by the way, we really, our hearts and thoughts go out to the people of Turkey and Syria during the recent horrible earthquake here in February of 2023. So this is going to, in fact, one of the things I read about is, in addition to all the horrible loss of lives, some UNESCO sites, some heritage sites have also likely been destroyed in the earthquake. So again, this will show you a little bit here, and kind of, I guess, uses the language, if you will, the lingo of a travel guide. So I encourage you with all these prompts to look at these, the plagiarism checker. We might come back to some of these during our conversations here in the videos. For example, I was thinking about, there's a prompt in here, not the novelist. That could be interesting. If you wanted students to learn different styles of novelists, you could actually maybe say, okay, I want you to act as a particular novelist. I want you to act as Dickens if you're teaching a British lit class or something like that. Relationship coach, rapper, motivational speaker, philosophy teacher, math teacher. I thought we might try this one later. This is kind of interesting. An AI writing tutor. We could put some language in and see exactly what the AI engine thinks of that language. So I guess my recommendation for you is to really think quite carefully about doing your prompts, whether you're doing image work or whether you're doing work in the realm of ChatGPT, which is going to be more, let's say, text-based and also computer-based programming. Now, I think one of the things that is really curious in our conversation today is this issue of what I'm calling professional ethics. And really by this, I'm speaking of situations in which we hop on to ChatGPT and we say to it, and we've done so many samples here, we say here, please write the beginnings of a cultural anthropology syllabus. Haven't done a full syllabus, so we'll see how it works here. And this is in an outline format. So again, this might be something that is going to be more like the topical areas. So as we're seeing this kind of scroll, and you can see I'm looking at this, I'm like, yeah, this looks pretty good so far. I think one of the questions we all will have, whether it's about Stable Diffusion or any of these image sites we've looked at, or ChatGPT, is to what extent does this technology challenge our ethics? our professional ethics as educators, as instructors, as administrators, as staff members, directors, etc. And so a question for me, and maybe for the college, is just for us to have internal dialogue about, to what extent will this change our work? Are we comfortable with it? Are there some areas where it may change work and we're not so comfortable? If you're asked to do something, even as a student in your class, let's say, to write an original paper, and you discover a student uses ChatGPT to write the entirety of the paper, are you okay with that? I suspect most of us wouldn't be, because we would worry, has that student really learned anything in the process of typing in one prompt into ChatGPT? That being said, going back to Goulet's idea of technology being a double-edged sword, we realize there's a value in engaging with this media, these new forms of technology, to make sure that our students are prepared for this new world of AI, which, believe me, this world is here, it's coming, it's becoming more and more profound, and I think we feel like it's maybe a little bit out of control. I'm bringing this up because here's the scenario. As we're talking about this connection to our work, my conundrum here is it okay for me to do this? I'm not a member of management, I'm not a board of trustee, I'm not anything like that. I work here in various teaching contexts. So it's not my decision to make. But the question is, as an institution, when we do our shared governance processes, what do we think about if someone in an office, could be an instructor, could be a staff member, administrator, anyone really on this campus, what if they are charged with writing a memo for their work? Is it okay for them to use ChatGPT? Again, I don't know. I'm not the decider here. I'm looking at it in a very agnostic or ambivalent sense. But the concern would be, is that an effective use of your time? Is that something that should be allowed or not? I'm just throwing out the question again. I'm not making a decision on that. So I think that's one aspect of thinking in this third video about work that inevitably we'll have to consider. So we're going to talk about some of that today. One of the things I wanted to show you is a policy. And specifically, I'm thinking one of the things we may end up doing as a college is saying, well, we have to really carefully look at any of our policies or even procedures. It could be stuff that happens with, I don't think we have like an AI bot on our website to answer questions. A lot of websites have that, and that's a technology powered by artificial intelligence. But this is one area in particular I encourage you to look at, and this is our academic and plagiarism policy. This is going to be directly out of the catalog. This is something I worked on years ago. I've mentioned this video with Dr. Steve Adams and a few other faculty. And one of the things that occurred to me is it's very much outdated now. We actually refer to iPods, we refer to PDAs, personal data assistants, devices that no longer literally are with us. And so one thing I think we could do is update this language a little bit, and then as a faculty, have a conversation about this stuff. So do we include in here number 5 or number 4, and we rearrange this and this becomes 5? Do we include in there plagiarism includes writing a paper on ChatGPT? I think that's a conversation we need to have shortly. I really do. The enforcement stuff likely will not change because this is something that happens at the level of your class, sometimes the level of the Office of Instruction or Student Services. This is the stuff, though, where I think with the definitions, we're going to have to go back in a little bit and update our policies. So in addition to us thinking about ethics, I think we need to have a very in-depth and critical conversation about exactly what constitutes, in this case, for our academic dishonesty and plagiarism policy, cheating. That is a key issue, and that's something certainly I know that our accrediting commission would want us to do. It's something that all our professional fields are concerned about. And I can't tell you how many sites I've seen recently on social media saying, whether it's faculty or articles, organizations saying, we're so worried about students using ChatGPT to plagiarize or cheat. I've mentioned in some of my blog post updates that there are sites out there that will actually check the language. We can try one of those out. I don't know if it's going to detect it here. Let's see, one I believe is called OpenAI Detector. Okay, so I'm just going to paste this in here. I don't know if it's going to work. And interesting, it's saying 10% possibility that's fake, okay? Well, the truth is, at least in this case, that should be 100% fake because this was written by ChatGPT. So I really caution us too with plagiarism to assume, I've given you links to a lot of sites that purport to detect AI writing. I don't know if that's really the case. And by the way, this is going to be such an issue for creative writing, poetry contests. Many of these my wife enters. I worry that someone's going to go on here and say, write a haiku about a computer in the woods. Let's see how good it is. A computer hums in the midst of nature's peace, silent yet so loud. Oh, I don't know. It's kind of poetic, kind of cool. But the conundrum from an ethical standpoint, again, is if I turn this into a haiku writing contest and I win $50, is that right? I would say personally that's not right. I think if you're doing any creative endeavor or research endeavor, there should be some sense, yes, you're always remixing. We live in a culture of remixing, whether it's music or video or ideas. However, this is not remixing. This is not taking anything more than a prompt that I type in. So my real concern about this right now, as we see the current state of AI, is this kind of thing is going to happen. So hence, it really requires us to have conversations about ethics. It has implications for our plagiarism policies and so forth. I think it also has implications here as I'm looking at my notes with the nature of work. And, you know, one of the things that's kind of fun in here is I might type a prompt in, work in the age of artificial intelligence. I'm always curious, like, what it's going to come up with. And sometimes the images it spits back, or even the text that it spits back, is for me kind of a metaphor of where we are. And we'll see. Again, this is kind of fun doing this stuff on the fly. And I hope you really engage. This is all free to use with some exceptions. DALL-E does have some plans for their AI programs that require payment or tokens. So this is a work in the age of artificial intelligence, and it looks like, you know, computer brains and robots. So maybe that's what we think of. This is very abstract, certainly as an image. And, you know, one of the things I think we need to talk about is, does this change our work at all? Does this change how you grade as an instructor? Does this change how you teach as an instructor? Does it affect some disciplines more than others? Wilderness studies versus anthropology versus math versus ceramics. You know, all the different disciplines we teach in have their specificity with content, with methods, approaches, hands-on versus theoretical, abstract versus applied. So in the case of this AI stuff, my real question for us is, how does it change work here at LTCC? What about our governance committees? Are we okay with, we were joking during an accreditation meeting on Friday, just this last week, what if I type in here, please write, this section of my accreditation report? Well, if it does it and we make a few minor changes, are we okay with that from an ethical standpoint? So I think an encouragement for all of us is to really talk about how work is changing, how this will change work for better or for worse here at Lake Tahoe Community College. So I think it's something else definitely we want to have a conversation about. Now, one of the things I think is pretty clear here as I put this video up is we're already doing some of this AI stuff. And I think some of us might say, oh my God, ChatGPT and Stable Diffusion and, deep fakes and all this kind of stuff that challenges our ethics and authenticity. And it maybe eventually means an era of singularity and transhumanism where we become like the machine, or the machine takes us over, as we've seen in sci-fi films like 2001 and so forth. There certainly are those legit concerns. At the same time, we're doing this already. So anytime I go in, open my phone up, type a text message, as you see here, it is predicting the sequence of letters coming next. And one of the things I find super fascinating is, and this does it on your phone, again, before the AI stuff, is if we're writing, a sentence, I am going to the store later today. As I'm writing this, as you see with my example on the phone here, it predicts the am, right? It thinks what sequence could happen here. So there are only certain possibilities. Like in the next block after unless I'm writing a Dadaistic poem or a William Burroughs cut-up poem from a magazine where I rearrange words randomly, it's never going to predict bird or toy. There's going to be a verb. Maybe it's going to be an action verb. Maybe it's going to be the verb to be here or something like that. So in each of these sequences, it predicts. And that's what's so darn amazing about ChatGPT and also the AI image programs is there's all this prediction going on, so it figures out the sequencing of meaning, of syntax, of language. And if you've studied language and anthropology, whatever, linguistics, this is super, super amazing. So one point I would make today is we're already doing some of this. At the same time, we definitely want to think about the fact that there are some new aspects of this that maybe will affect things in a negative sense. So we have to have, I think, really what I've been stressing throughout this conversation, that balanced perspective of the two-edged sword of AI technologies here in education. So I think one of the things that is really fascinating with using all this AI technology is the possibilities for research. And I'm talking about whether you do research or professional work as a faculty member, as a staff member, or whether you ask your students to do it. So for example, maybe you want your students to get started with a project. You might already do this. You might have them go to Google, to the web, and say, hey, I want you to go on here and look into the topic of this is something I'm working on now, anthropology. What the heck is multimodal anthropology? I want you to write a paper on it. So in some cases, you would find, say, an article, and, in a sense, you could say there's an AI, there's an algorithm, a bot, behind all of this technology. In fact, you may have heard Google is kind of freaked out about OpenAI's ChatGPT. So they're just launching their Apprentice Bard, or I believe for short, Bard technology that will incorporate basically ChatGPT instead of Google. So again, I'm really asking all of us to not try to hide the technology from students, because students will eventually find it. You will open up Microsoft Word and it will appear in Microsoft Word. It will be here. It will be a part of it. You will open up Google, and I don't know what it'll look like with Bard, but it'll appear. So you can have the same conversation or image creation that you do on Stable Diffusion or DALL-E. You can have the same kind of chat, generative AI stuff going on in ChatGPT on Google. So it's going to happen, of course, so we know that's happening. But what I'm saying is there's an element, we're already doing this in research. We might begin with a particular group or a journal, a conversation. This is one here, and as a result of this, we might actually get some ideas and develop our research. So in that sense, I'm going to argue with you and say, ChatGPT does not necessarily have to be seen as a form of cheating or academic dishonesty. I could put the same thing in here and say, what is multimodal anthropology? Again, we're talking about the research side of things. It's going to spit something out. It's a subfield of cultural anthropology. It focuses on multimedia, verbal, written, gesture, expression, all kinds of media forms, different channels of expression. Basically, as I'm involved in with this group at UC Irvine right now, it's everything but text. I mean, it could be textual modes, but the text would likely, like here, be combined with visual modes. So this is a good start. And again, I see no problem inherently as a researcher or as an instructor with asking my students to do this. In fact, it's introducing the technology. The problem would be, I'm not going to do this, is please write me a short essay on multimodal anthropology. I'm actually not going to hit go because maybe part of me right now doesn't want to see that, because I'm okay with this prompt. Informational. Again, I want to be critical of this as a researcher. We should implore our students to do this. Definitely, you want to make sure this is correct. You have cases in ChatGPT where books have been listed by the bot that don't even exist. So this is not flawless. We should be critical of this knowledge as we are critical of Google, as we are critical of all the knowledge that we investigate as scholars, as researchers, as academics, as instructors, and so forth. But I want to challenge us and say, this is pretty darn exciting to start a research project with this. You could start a computer program like this and maybe have the students adapt a program. Or you're an art faculty, and let's say you start on Stable Diffusion and you say, let's do something laptop in the style of DALL-E. I don't know, Salvador Dali. And we use that as a research prompt to get us starting. Well, what does this image site think DALL-E looks like? I would think of, the perception of time, or is it the perception of memory, his famous painting with the clocks? Yeah, so in this case, this looks more like an image of DALL-E. I actually kind of wanted the laptop maybe to be Uzi or something, but this is pretty good. I mean, there are some surreal images here. kind of burning fish or whatever. So it's kind of getting in that realm. So one idea I had is you could use this to generate an image. This could be for any of your classes, and that image could actually be your research prompt or your paper prompt or your project prompt. You might be teaching a music class and you could type a prompt in here, even though it's an image, that music could somehow parallel with the image, or it could relate to the image. So you can really, I think, experiment with the multimedia forms available here and use either the text stuff here, the computer programming stuff here, to kickstart the initial stages of a project. So I'm going to argue and say that I will certainly use this for my own research. I just do not want to give my students the advice ever, of course, to use this to write an entire paper. So I think that's one real concern. All right, and I thought we could try one more example here of using ChatGPT to look at a research prompt. So let's give that one a look as well. How could I create a new research approach in cultural anthropology that allows me to study the challenges of artificial intelligence? I am just totally coming up with stuff. I don't know what it's going to spit out. And that's kind of the fun of this, frankly. Sometimes I always just copy this because I worry that I'm always worried I'm going to lose my prompt here, but let's see what it comes up with. Okay, it's coming up with steps. So it's actually figured out steps for me. Define the research question. Identify relevant theories and concepts. So this, frankly, right now is getting a little general. I think this actually would apply to a lot of research questions, not just AI. Consider interdisciplinary methodologies, develop a research design. This is very generic. I'm not super impressed with this. Engage with stakeholders. So the reason I'm not impressed is all I'd have to do is replace the word AI with another word like, healthy food or globalization, whatever, right? So this is not that impressive because it seems to me it's just spitting out 5 areas that are good for doing research in anthropology, but it doesn't really help me come up with any new research ideas for artificial intelligence. So I'm just suggesting if we use this for research, we'll talk about this today, we have to be very careful, I think, about the prompts we use and maybe what we intend to get out of this particular algorithm that's generating these responses. Now, another thing I think related to new research is this idea of new content. So in other words, we can use Stable Diffusion and create images we have never seen before. So I'm going to type in here an amusement park, because I study theme parks, that has all kinds of strange, surreal, and impossible rides. I have no idea what this will produce. Let's say I want to do it in the style of expressionism, okay? So what I love about this is you can combine, and we got into that talking in this video about language and the predictive ability of sequencing, of how the ChatGPT text stuff can predict the next word and complete these complex sequences of meaning. The same thing is going on with images. So think about all the information I've given this. Amusement park, different types of impossible rides, and the style of expressionism. I could add more prompts to this. I mean, the sky's the limit, as we've talked about with these prompt guides that really help you write these. So let's see what Stable Diffusion will produce here. I'm kind of curious on this one. Ooh, these are nice. These are really good. These are seriously, like, I see some of these and I'm like, these could be illustrations for books. By the way, some of these images, you're going to see sometimes the resolution is low. In some cases, if you continue to blow this up, you're going to see that it's not, maybe you're going to see some pixels coming in. That's not too bad, actually. You can always, in the case of a lot of these, click on the bottom, but these are quite good. And so a few of these I would probably save because they're just so strange. So the point I want to try to make is there's new content being created by AI, and this is something I will totally embrace. I actually use in a lot of my music forms of randomization. So I have a device, for example, that allows me to take anything that generates a biofeedback signal, an energy, like an organic object, a banana or something, or a plant, and I can connect TENS cables to that, and then I can generate sounds, I can generate rhythms and pulses. So I actually am way into this just musically, and a lot of artists from the past, like John Cage, actually use forms of randomization, like the Book of Changes, the I Ching, to produce musical composition. So this is actually not that different from a lot of the stuff going on in the 60s. If you study happenings art, Dick Higgins, John Cage, all those kind of folks who were doing things that were absolutely in line with creating new entities that hadn't existed before, or that challenged the conventions of traditional art in our world. So again, I really want to encourage us to take that approach. Just personally, I'm saying that because I think there's a lot of opportunities here in terms of new forms of research, new content, and so forth. So I think a conversation we have to have today, and we'll continue to have certainly in workshops and other trainings and videos, is how does this change teaching? And I could also say, how does it change counseling? How does it change library and information services? And I know Mel and Kimber and the many others at our library have been talking about this stuff for years, doing workshops on information literacy. Mel did such a great workshop for me as part of the foundation sponsored technology grant, where she talked about kind of, I always think of Stephen Colbert and the word truthiness, which I think is now in the OED dictionary. But this idea that there's different levels of truth to different levels of information that we interact with. With deep fakes, as we're worried about this, if you've had a chance to look into deep fakes, we should be concerned that deep fakes could absolutely alter the course of history. If someone creates a fake video of Putin or of a famous person like Elon Musk, I think that's Elon Musk, or someone else talking, and then that is used to convince someone that this person said that, that's potentially frightening if that starts a war or a terrorist attack. If you think about things that have happened, like the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack in Paris. I mean, things like that can happen based on an image. We know images have incredible power, going back right to graven images in the Bible and sort of what Jean Baudrillard and other French philosophers have talked about with simulation and one thing simulating another. And that new entity, also to talk about Walter Benjamin from part 1 of this video, that new entity is somehow less truthy or less alike the original. It's less authentic, etc. So I think an important conversation for us to have is, how does OpenAI, whether it's the image stuff, the computer or text-based stuff here, change our counseling approaches, our teaching approaches, our library approaches, etc. Again, my feeling is some disciplines will differ. If you're teaching a wilderness studies class, you might indeed use this, say, in a field setting to get some information. But if you're doing, and again, I've never taken a wilderness class, I'm only speaking from very limited, if no information, but if you're teaching avalanche techniques, maybe you could find some safety stuff on here. But the whole point of wilderness is being out in the field. Likewise, if you want to be a good archaeologist, you can't just learn on a computer or reading books or texts. You have to get in the field. So I think some of it will change and some of it won't. So I think the conversation is, and we can actually do that here, how will AI change the nature of college teaching? We'll ask the expert, the AI bot, has the potential to impact college teaching and education. And by the way, I think I did 2 versions of this in the past. This is the kind of the happy one, or the positive one. You can personalize learning. You can automate grading and feedback. You can have intelligent tutors, like we've talked about, maybe with writing, which we'll probably look at here. You can improve student engagement, the nature of engagement with the learning environments, and you can increase the accessibility of things. It's important to note that it's not a replacement for human teachers. So the bot has been trained very well. It knows not to say, we're going to take all your jobs, kind of thing. Or counseling is one that I kind of fear, like, what if in the future we just have robot counselors? All the counselors and therapists and social workers would be out of jobs. So this is a real concern, certainly. So as we ask questions about our teaching today, I think we have to say, well, what could happen, positive and negative, and then hopefully we come maybe to a balanced conversation. So it's very important, in addition to our college policies, that you think about in your syllabus where exactly to identify the use of this stuff, the pros and the cons, talk about that, but maybe more appropriately talk about, is it allowed or not? If it is allowed, how do you want students to use it or to not use it in your class? When we're writing papers, I think that's going to be a main area of concern. How do you decide on, can this be used or not? And then what are you going to do as an instructor? As I've talked about in my previous blog post about this, there are some sites out there that will allow you to identify AI-generated content, but how trustworthy are those sites? So we have a conundrum there, I think, because we really have to think about the nature of writing and, the fact that students will not learn to write a research paper if they have Chat GPT generate the whole thing. So that is a super concern for us. And by the way, it's not just writing papers. I'm not a programmer, but one of the things you can do is write a short Python script that adds, what could I say? I'm not a programmer, so I don't know how to do this. That adds the number of days in a month for a year. Is that even a thing? I don't know. Let's try it. I don't know if it's going to work, but I heard that people are using it to create computer scripts. And yeah, it's doing it. Okay, so that is a Python script. And look, it even opens a different window for this. So, like if you're someone like Eric Egan teaching cybersecurity or programming, one of, I think, the concerns becomes if students are using this and then they hit copy code and they copy it in their assignment for your class, that's the equivalent, right, of plagiarism in an English class where ChatGPT does the whole thing here to create it by itself without any of your work or intervention or hard work that we expect in a class. So I'm raising that because I think regardless of the subject you teach, it could be a real conundrum there for you. Now, I would say the good news is maybe like in visual arts, if you had a student create a painting or a graphic design, just because of some of the resolution limitations, at least of the basic versions of some of the generative image systems out there, I don't know if you're going to fool an art teacher, right? Like particularly if you said do an oil painting in class. But you could potentially see that if someone did a graphic design and they had it done inside of DALL-E, and they turned it in as their work, that again is the equivalent of plagiarism in the English class if ChatGPT is creating the entirety of that assignment. So, the sky is almost a limit on some of this stuff, what it can do. It can do computer stuff. It could write song lyrics. It'll even do chord progression. So I could say, please write a chord progression that is similar to, let's just try this, Bach. I don't know if that's going to work. One, 4, 5, 1. Yeah, it's a 4-chord progression. In the key of C, here are the chords: C, F, G, and C. And then it's telling you a little bit more. It's saying Bach's music is characterized by the use of simple and elegant chord progressions that support rich and complex melodies. So again, if you had a music class and students had to write a chord progression, and this is a really simple one, you could find that on Wikipedia, or you might just kind of know that by analyzing some Bach. But the problem here would be, again, if you use it to cheat, to do something that you didn't go through the process of learning and listening to Bach and really understanding, maybe listening to some lectures or doing a reading in your music appreciation book. If you just pop this in and said, I'm done, that would be a real problem. Now, the other side of it, where we're really talking about, again, the two-edged sword, the positive side of the two-edged sword here is that we're learning a little bit about Bach in this process. So again, you just really have to think about it for your discipline, what you're doing, and really clearly defining upfront in your policies, in your class instructions, in your walkthrough class video, how they can use these tools or not use these tools. That definition from the beginning is really going to allow you to establish the rules of your class so that the students hopefully follow them and have a clear understanding of how to use the tools or not. One of the things I did in my video on technology, which is kind of relevant to what we're talking about here, was I encouraged you in that video to kind of take a form of technology, like it could be perhaps the cell phone, and you have that object, and then you think of just very basic like pros, plus, and cons. And you would talk about a form of social change. So a pro for the cell phone is, it's with you all the time. There's a ubiquity to it, right? You can use it for a camera. You can use it to text. You can use it to find information and watch videos. A definite con behind it is we spend too much time on our phones. And believe me, when I get those reports from my phone saying you have an average of X hours per week, I think about that. So there are pros and cons to all this, and that's really what I'm trying to present in this video series. I keep calling it agnostic or ambivalent because I don't want to just preach to you either pro and con about this technology. Believe me, I'm a very high-tech person. I think one of the highest tech on campus. I live this stuff, I breathe this stuff, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to see all of it as positive or all of it as negative. So I think that's very important. Now, one thing I think we can do as we start to adapt our teaching is let's ask ourselves, what do we need to do in terms of changing our teaching? I think one thing we probably need to do is create, I can do it right here, create a statement that requires students to not use Chat GPT to write the entire class essay. I have no idea if this will work. I'm doing this on the fly. Maybe my prompt will work. Let's see what happens here. I think this is something we have to do. Plagiarism of any kind, including the use of AI-powered writing tools like Chat GPT, is strictly prohibited. This is really good. I have to tell you, I do this stuff. I will ask it to write something like in that first video when I asked it to write poli-sci questions. And I'm like, damn, this is better than I would do. It seriously is. So one of the things it can do is really challenge our assumptions that we're amazing writers. Not that we should do that, but I mean, it definitely gets us to think about, there's always improvement in our writing. So there you go. I mean, this is something I think we all need to do probably in the near future, maybe the next year or a couple quarters. Include a statement in here. I think also have a conversation with the Senate about the plagiarism policy and how we might want to alter that. And that's something that maybe I'll kickstart. I don't know. I'm pretty interested in this stuff, as you might guess. So I think in the future, have conversations about how to change things in our syllabus, how to use this in writing context. One of the things that I'm very curious about is I want to try this. Let's try it here. This AI writing tutor prompt. Okay, let me put this in. I want you to act as an AI writing tutor. You should use your rhetorical knowledge. Okay, so I guess I would put this in. Sure, I'd be happy to act as a writing tutor. Okay, provide the student writing. Okay, so let's see here. Do I have anything that, let's see here. I was just going to look up something I wrote. Embarrass myself here. If I can find a piece of writing that maybe is a short excerpt and it can cut it to shreds. Let's try this. This is one of my most recent readers, a reader in themed spaces. I'm going to open it up here, and hopefully I can, sometimes PDFs don't allow you to cut and paste perfectly. So let me just take this here, this sentence, or sorry, a couple paragraphs really, and I'll put it in here, and then I'm going to hit return. Now you can already see here it's got some errors, and that's just the PDF. Sometimes the characters don't translate, so excuse that for now. And then I'm going to do it here. Clarity. The writing is dense and complex. Thank you, ChatGPT. See, I knew this was going to do it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to feel horrible after this. Organization. The paragraph jumps from one idea to the next. Okay. And that's probably the case because I'm jumping actually from different. This is the introduction to the reader. So I know I'm trying to justify it. Bear with me. Purpose. The purpose of the piece is not clear, again, because it's a short excerpt. Concision. The text is lengthy, could benefit from a more concise and focused approach. There's a lot of technical language, and that's definitely the case. I'll tell you, when you write academic writing, it's definitely technical. This one I like, though. This is something I struggle with if I'm writing for a pop audience versus an academic audience, is a lot of times I don't have the best clarity in my writing. So again, this is kind of cool. So maybe those of you teaching English or working on papers, do you want ChatGPT to be used as a writing tutor? Maybe you say, I do, but I don't want students to cheat. So how do we get around that? Do I define to the students what prompts they could use to enter into ChatGPT? Again, this is available today. This can be accessed by any student in the world on a computer, albeit maybe not in countries where there's censorship, but at least in the United States and maybe Europe and South America. So, a question I think is define for your class how to use this, and also think of yourself as an instructor, counselor, librarian, how you're going to change what you do, if anything. Maybe make a list on a piece of paper. The 5 ways that I'm going to change as a professional here as a faculty are the following. And then you kind of think about this critically. So it might be something cool to just think about and to have, again, conversations as a faculty through Senate or small working groups about the nature of how this changes our faculty profession here at the college. Okay, so that will be it today here in part 3 of the video, talking about the transformations that we might use to adapt to some of this technology in artificial intelligence and education. I'll be back in the future with additional videos, whether it's about AI in education or some of these other topics. I think we've learned throughout this video series that we have to be very careful and cautious about the technologies that we are adapting to our institution, to our classrooms, to our office spaces, and so forth. A lot of great stuff out there to take advantage of, but a lot of concerns that we should also be aware of as we move forward here with these new AI technologies in education. So thanks for listening. I'll be back with additional teaching and learning videos in the future.